Shalom, everybody. Welcome back to the Baal Shalom's Matan Torah with commentary by Rabbi Abraham Mordechai and Gottlieb. We'll be referring to as the Rebbe Shlita as always. We are in section 27, the bottom page 125. Last class we spoke about being a kingdom of priests and a holy nation, and that it's hinting to the fact that there's a differentiation. There seems to be redundance there because priests, by definition, are sanctified to the holy temple. Priests understood to be holy. So isn't it one and the same to be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation? So we'll clarify the matter here. It says the header, God's invitation to Israel to accept the Torah actually does specify what is required of them and what reward is being offered. What is required is to be a kingdom of priests, and the reward is to be a holy nation. Holy is a very high level. We use the word so simply, colloquially, in the religious world, or even the non-religious world. If they mention the word holy, it might have even negative connotations because it's just so simple. But Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair, a fourth generation Tana, a sage, a member of Chazal, paints a very vivid picture as far as the roadmap, the ladder of spiritual progression via ethical work on oneself. And this is illuminated by the work by the Ramchal, who was one of the greatest Kabbalists of all time, in his ethical masterpiece, Mesilas Yesharim, translated as Path of the Upright or Path of the Just. And there paints the steps of what one must do to adhere to the Creator's will in order to sanctify himself completely. Kadosh, holy in itself, is a madrega, it's a level on this ladder, and it's amongst the highest. So it's not to be taken lightly that to be a holy nation is the reward, of course. Because to be holy is to be sanctified. More specifically, it's to be distinguished. It's something that is separated from the mundane. The entire creation is mundane relative to what is holy, because the entire chomer, the raw material of reality, being that this human being is the centerpiece of this reality, is the will to receive for itself alone. So by definition, what is holy relative to the will to receive is giving. Because everything in reality are just different levels and measurements of the will to receive, from the inanimate to plant to animal speaking and godly natures. All of them are just different delineations of the will to receive. So if we can truly actualize and manifest this most exalted state, to be a holy nation, that's the reward. But let's get into the details in the text. The Baal HaSulam begins, however, by applying what we've explained from the beginning of the essay until now, the verses become clarified together with their format. They serve the role, which is appropriate to them, of illustrating negotiation, including an offer and a consent. That is, in these words, God really does offer them the whole form and content of the service in Torah and mitzvot, as well as specify the giving of that reward which is fitting for them to hear about. The form of the service in Torah and mitzvot is expressed in the verse, quote, "And you will be for me a kingdom of priests." For a kingdom of priests means all of you, from young to old, will be like priests. Just as the priests have no portion or inherited domain, nor any physical acquisition of land, because God is their inherited domain. says the Rebbe Shlita on the spot, in contrast to the other tribes that each received a portion and inheritance in the land, the priests did not receive anything, but were rather designated for the service in the holy temple. The Baal Sulam continues, thus will the whole nation be aligned in its entirety, so that the earth and everything in it, all of it, will be dedicated to God. May he be blessed. And no individual have any business with the world except to keep God's mitzvot and to satisfy the needs of another, to the extent that he or she will not lack any of his or her wishes. In this way, not one person will have to worry about his or her own needs. I read a commentary by the Rebbe Shita quoting the Rebbe Zatzal, responding to a question by one of his students. The question, I'm paraphrasing, is something along the lines of, if we are all destined for the ultimate perfection in unity with the Creator, why do the work? All of us, somehow, some way, whether it's through the path of Torah and Mitzvot or the path of suffering, either way, he will bring us there. Because the purpose of creation is is his desire to give goodness to creation. That desire can't be actualized without us being able to receive. So it doesn't make sense that the notion of eternal damnation would exist in a system that is completely and utterly built only to give goodness to the creation. But that's already me digressing, just to clarify the point, maybe if listeners aren't familiar, that the Jewish notion of what the nations of the world called hell, we have Gehenna. Gehenna is, I think, humorously described, if I could say such a thing, as the washing machine. Meaning it's a state of consciousness, obviously beyond the body. It's an afterlife, more so after goof experience, that is described to be great sorrow and busha, shame, because one is shown in their mind's eye, in the essence of their soul, what they did and what they could have done. The contrast of what they decided to do with their free will versus the ultimate potential of how they could have finished the job and corrected themselves in that lifetime. So this is very refining. It's very cleaning, in order that the soul can come back and enclose again within a body for another shot at the game of life, and a reincarnation, and a Gilgul, as we are taught. So in regards to doing the work, again, the student asks, what's the point? We're all going to get there. Alluding to, even if I go to Gehenna, I'll still be refined, and eventually I'll make it to the Gan Eden. I'll make it to the true state of consciousness of total, eternal love and light, being one with the Creator. A side note, Gehenna is actually part of Gan Eden. It's an outer layer of Gan Eden, so to speak, as described in the Zohar Kodesh, and not some separate realm that the nations of the world so often visualize. Even the Jewish people probably more often visualize as such. So the Rebbe Zatzal's answer was, if you're hungry right now, are you going to wait 12 hours? No. You want to fill your hunger. You want to fill your desire. So if we were focused on the center point of achieving our correction, if we were focused on achieving adhesion with the Creator, then we're probably hungry very often, because we are aware of the contrast of where we are at and where we can be in theory, and thus that should instill within us a desire to do better and try more and give our utmost in heart, soul, and resources in order to come to this exalted potential. And what's alluded to here in the text is a utopia. And that's not wishful thinking, it's our destiny. The question is, how quick? Do we want to expedite it via entering the system of Torah and mitzvot, being the path of light, which the Creator surely prefers that we do? Or we'll get there through the path of suffering, which either way eventually veers us to the path of Torah and mitzvot, but it's a longer road, to say the least. The Baal Sulam continues, in this manner, even non-religious tasks, such as harvesting, sowing, etc., are seen to have the same character as the services of the sacrifices that the priest performed in the holy temple. What's the difference if I'm occupied with the commandment of sacrificing a burnt offering to God, which is a positive commandment, or if I'm fulfilling the positive commandment of, and love your fellow as yourself, v'ahavta li'arecha kamocha. So it turns out that someone who harvests his or her field in order to feed another person is similar to someone who is presenting a sacrifice to God. The Rebbe Shita says in the spot, it follows that the direction of Jewish society must be to arrive at the condition called a kingdom of priests, that is, where each individual does his or her work according to his or her talents and expertise. But no one expects to receive any payment, but rather works only for the benefit of others. By moving in this direction, a nation is built completely on the base of selfless giving and loving the other. When we arrive at this stage, no one will lack anything, as opposed to a situation where everyone looks out for his or her own needs. This is precisely the condition where the individual finds that he or she lacks a great deal, since his or her needs keep getting greater. As it should be. Naturally, we should be developing our desire. In contrast to many traditions and ways of the world that want to nullify or destroy our desires, God forbid. The Rebbe Shita has said, I think quoting the Rebbe Zatzal, that if we didn't have desire, we would be in need of a big doctor. Because our desire, the Ratzon Lakabel, our desire to receive, is our chomer. That's our material. That's the raw material of all of reality. That's what keeps us moving. The point is to graduate it and develop it. We want to graduate to eventually having the will to receive for spirituality. We want the will to receive to have devekus, adhesion. And even if it's not with the correct intention, it should be done. It should always be done, because Chazal have already told us, again and again, that through lo lishma, meaning not for the sake of heaven, we come to lishma. It's necessary to comment that that is done assuming someone was within the system and has the tools and is conscious in the midst of their actions that I want to be rewarded with a higher nature. I want to be rewarded. I demand that I'm given the ability to love the other, the ability to give, the ability to have greater emunah, the ability to nullify myself before another, so on and so forth. But the notion that if I can't do something with the correct intention, I shouldn't do it, is extremely corrupted and is wrong. And unfortunately, there are many camps and branches of the tradition that seem to impose such an idea that if it's not l'shem shamayim, if it's not for the sake of heaven, it's going to corrupt the system. Because if you're doing it in order to receive, and you know it's in order to receive, then you're shifting the entire world to the side of demerit as opposed to merit. So if you know you're going to do that, why would you put yourself in that position? So the Rebbe Shlita has said that, what are sins? Averos, sins, are kelim, they're vessels. In essence, behind all the veils, when someone veers off from what they're supposed to do, it builds a vessel in order to be filled with the abundance and light of the Creator in order to correct that mistake and come to a higher point. It's used as a stepping stone, ideally. So if one knows this idea, then they do not have to worry that they are doing Torah and mitzvot without the right intention, because they want to come to the right intention. And they're not going to stop themselves from slowly but surely refining themselves just because they're not doing it for the sake of heaven. Because that's a very lofty level. And there's no way to get there without all the intermediary steps, even if it's consciously doing it in order to receive. It has to be done. The Baal Salam continues. Not only that, but it's logical to deem the commandment and love your fellow as yourself to be even more important than bring a sacrifice, as we have shown above. Indeed, this is not yet the end of it, because the whole of the Torah and the mitzvot were given for the sole purpose of refining Israel, which is the refinement of the body. See section 12. But the Rebbe Shlita says on the spot here, the refinement of the body, the guf, does not refer to the physical body, but the bodily portion of a person's soul, which is the desire to receive pleasure and joy. Meaning the body is a physical branch, manifestation, representing the principle of our innermost desire to receive pleasure and joy. Because generally speaking, we use our senses, which are our vessels of receiving, for our own benefit. Whether it's something that tastes delicious, or it's good sense, or it's good music, hopefully beautiful, powerful divrei Torah, words of Torah, seeing beautiful sights made by the Creator, and feeling things that are pleasant, to each their own. These are all representing different aspects and different degrees of our desire to receive pleasure and joy. And we can correct these vessels in order that they're sanctified, in order to give nachar ruach, joy, to the Creator. After this, meaning the refinement of the body, one will merit a true reward, because the Torah and the mitzvot, and the true reward is the cleaving to God, devekut, which is the purpose of creation. See section 15. And the reward is expressed in the words, a holy nation. By cleaving to God, we become holy. As it is written, quote, you will be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. The Rebbe Shita says on this The nature of spiritual work is called a kingdom of priests, whereas the nature of the reward is called a holy nation. Explanation of the reward. By means of the spiritual work, an effort to be someone who gives selflessly, we merit the true reward, which is the state of cleaving to God. To cleave to God is to share in God's nature. That is, just as God's nature is only to give, so cleaving to God, dvekut, means that we have merited the acquisition of this character of giving selflessly. As we've talked about before, similarity of form. In spirituality, connection and closeness is based on character, a state of being, not distance, God forbid, because there's no space, time, or place in spirituality. It's all one. And this is called a holy nation, because the acquisition of the second nature of giving selflessly causes us to be sanctified and separated from the first nature of wanting to receive for our own benefit. Furthermore, by virtue of our receiving from heaven a second nature, we merit an even higher level of cleaving to God than a giving nature. This higher level is the perception of the names of God, which are the deeper meanings of the Torah and the mitzvot. This is the perception of the loftiness of God's holiness, and is also included in the concept of a holy nation. Again, that was the Rebbe Shita's commentary on that. To continue the words of the Baal Sulam. So you see that in the words, a kingdom of priests has expressed the complete form of the service of God based on the pivot of and love your fellow as yourself. This means a kingdom which is entirely made up of priests. Instead of property, their inheritance is God, and they have no individual ownership of any physical possessions. And it must be admitted that this is the only definition by which can be understood the idea of a kingdom of priests. For you cannot interpret it as the bringing of sacrifices to the altar, since that cannot be said of the whole nation. For then, who would be the ones bringing the sacrifices? Also, with regard to taking the gifts of the priesthood, who would act as the givers? And also, it's impossible to interpret them, being the words, a kingdom of priests, as referring to the holiness of the priests, since it's already stated, and a holy nation. Rather, all its meaning can only be that God is their inherited domain, that they lack any material possession for themselves, that is the level of v'ahavta lirecha kamocha, and love your fellows yourself, that encompasses the whole of the Torah, as stated above. And in the words, a holy nation is expressed the full form of the promised reward, which is cleaving to God, dvekut, as stated above. The Rebbe Shita says, there are two other accepted interpretations of a kingdom of priests. First, just as priests have a special role of being the ones who bless the people of Israel, so the people of Israel can bless the nations of the world. And two, just as the priests teach and give inspiration to the nation of Israel, so the nation of Israel is meant to inspire the whole world. Both of these interpretations are actually included in Baal Sulam's concept of a kingdom of priests. For it is only when you have merited the acquisition of the second nature of selfless giving and are cleaving to the living God, and then will others be blessed by you, to also merit lives of giving selflessly. And only when the nation of Israel lives according to the principles of what's mine is yours and what's yours is yours, then they serve as a light to the nations of the world. But to clarify a most important point regarding being a light unto the nations is that first and foremost, we have to be a light unto ourselves. Meaning in the midst of our inner work, we take that innermost point within, which is the point of the Jew, the point of the Yehudi, the Yisrael, Yasharkel, and allow it to spread light into the nations of the world. In order, the nations of the world are drawn to that innermost aspect. Meaning, the innermost aspect is our godly soul that is only giving and only loving. It's a portion of the Creator on high, so to speak. Chelek Elokai Mimal. And the nations of the world are representing all the aspects of the will to receive for ourselves alone within us. So we must shine a light onto those inner aspects of our ego. And by doing this work, we, by definition, because all of humanity is interconnected in a telepathic web of consciousness, being that we are one soul, doing this inner work, by definition, is already being a light onto them. Because as we correct our inner nations, we will see it manifested in the correction of the outer nations. And we will see the further respect and reverence that they have for the Jewish people, being that we were given the great privilege to have the Torah and the mitzvot in order that we can inspire and elevate them to their greatest potential and therefore be a holy nation and a kingdom of priests. And to clarify, that doesn't make us better. Every single human has their particular portion. As a king does not give his son or daughter more land than they can handle. So I've heard the Rebbe Shita say recently that in the examples of, let's say, the amazing altruism that is witnessed in the nations of the world, let's say in the time of the Holocaust, where non-Jews risked their lives to save Jews, whether it was one person in their attic or thousands of people over years of time. Those individuals, without a doubt, are on a much, much, much higher spiritual level than a simple religious Jew that does his part, prays 3 times a day, a little bit of learning here and there. Of course, we never know the truth about a person and what they're doing as far as their intentions and their actions. But to contemplate an individual puts himself in that position, says the Rebbe Shita, surely that person is on a higher level. Just to clarify, the ability of all humanity to reach the highest degrees. So we all merit the highest degrees of our potential so that we can spread those waves to our families, loved ones, communities, and to the world at large, speedily and soon. Of course, slowly but surely, but may it be in our days. I'm going to check out if there is any comments, questions. Maybe a shkoyach. There are 2 forces, the power of light and the power of darkness. Light is freedom, darkness is control. Despite a lot of good intentions, religious discipline holds on to a frequency of control. From Gaia Art and Spirit. The truth is there are not 2 forces. We, at least as far as the Jewish tradition is concerned, being that Ein od milvado, there is nothing other than him. Practically, from our perspective, being that we are so far removed, in our inner work, we do discern and decide for ourselves the difference between good and bad, light and darkness. Surely, it's true. But behind all the veils, we're taught that the center point of all of reality is the desire to give goodness to creation. That's the only thing that's ever going on. It's delineated as the sphere of Keter, the crown of all reality, meaning every single minutia of reality, to the greatest details, to the smallest, every single detail, is the Creator willing existence into being in order to give goodness to His creation. So the darkness, as much as it may pain us, as much as we may not understand and project our own understanding and egos upon the scenario, for example, when we see chaos, war, darkness, and Holocaust in the world, to employ emuna, and this is the idea of faith, above our das, above our understanding. Because our understanding, as difficult as it is to admit, is flawed, in the sense that we are beings whose essence is chisaron, of lacking. We are attempting to connect to the abundance that's within and unveil that godly soul, surely. But we are lack, and the Creator is perfect. But the Creator is willing everything into existence at all times, and only in order to give us goodness. It takes time in the big picture to see things come full circle. But all the darkness, relatively speaking, are really just vessels in order to be filled with light. We should desire to connect as much as we can to light, as we are taught in our tradition to connect to Sfarim V'Sofrim, holy books and the holy people who wrote the books. Because to connect to holy works means that we are connecting to the consciousness of those individuals. We're actually enveloping our souls with aspects of theirs. To contemplate the spiritual levels that such individuals reach, and to draw those lights within ourselves, this will help us slowly but surely see that even the darkness behind all the veils is all just the Creator's light and love. But it's true, there is practically, in terms of our inner work, a difference between light and darkness. But behind it all, and it's explained more deeply in the Kabbalah, I can't go into so much detail, that the highest levels, it's all one. There's no dissonance, there's no two forces. It's just the Creator. As far as the notion of religious disciplines holding on to a frequency of control, that could be true. There's many religious influences out there, and I think control generally can be understood or interpreted as having a negative connotation. The truth is, we need control for ourselves. The Torah and the mitzvot, for non-Jews, the Noahide laws, provide individuals an exacting spiritual framework to allow oneself to slowly but surely refine themselves in order that they can come to a state of altruism, of giving and loving the other, as it doesn't come simply. Normally speaking, even our giving and our loving is in order that we receive, that we feel good, that we pat ourselves on the back for our actions. To come to the most exalted states takes a lot of time and a lot of refinement and a lot of inner work. And the Creator gave us the Torah and His mitzvot in order that we can do just that, to refine ourselves. For no other reason was that given to us. That is our merit. That is our zchut in Hebrew. But merit in Hebrew, zchut, comes from the language of hizdachut, which means to refine. Because the greatest merit that we can ask for is to be refined. Because the more refined we are, because we're closer in character to the Creator, then the closer we are to Him. Because similarity in spirituality is a matter of character. That's what similarity of form is. So to be close to the Creator in form, to be more giving, loving, and compassionate, that's freedom. True freedom is to be free from our ego. True freedom is to be free from the control of our desire to receive for ourselves alone. To be able to achieve that, we need a framework of control, because we need to control our desire to receive for ourselves alone. We need to control our ego and have it not to run rampant and have us chase after every little desire that we want. So control, in that sense, is a positive connotation, because we need control over ourselves and our desires in order to slowly but surely rise. BJNG, thank you so much for your lovely comments there. I'm very glad you find it so educational. This is the 29th lesson in the series, so if you haven't checked that already, I would recommend going back to the beginning. Why not? We've been here for a while now, almost half a year, slowly but surely going through this amazing book. It's an English translation of the Baal Sulam's Matan Torah. It can be found on most websites and bookstores. It's called Giving the Essential Teaching of the Kabbalah. Highly recommend. Okay. If that's all the questions and comments for now, until next time, please subscribe to our channel. I know if you're an English speaker, if you're from America, or whatever your situation is, this is a Hebrew channel, as we are here in Kiryat Yarim in Israel. But the English classes are given by me. We're learning this book. And very shortly, I'll be also starting a series on the introduction to the Zohar, also in English, by Rabbi A쉬ra그, the Baal Sulam, and also the Betichat L'Chochmat HaKabbalah, which is a most exalted work by the Baal Sulam, written towards the end of his life, which is a short summary of his magnum opus of the Talmud Esrei Sefirot, which is an extremely detailed commentary on the Arizal's Eitz Chaim, which explains all the myriad details of the spiritual systems and our soul, which really, to put it simply, is in order to bring us to the state of loving the other. The idea of zchut is equivalent to our having received from Hashem the privilege of being Jews. Definitely. There's many parameters. It's a funny saying that we say often in the learning of Kabbalah, in the Chochmat HaEmet, the wisdom of truth, that zeh v'zeh, this and that, gam v'gam, also this and also that, meaning because some of these concepts are abstract, it can be two things at once. And because there's so many amazing words with so many secret, deep definitions, zchut, certainly, it's amazing, amazing merit and privilege to be a Jew and to be a human being for that matter. Because the Rebbe Shlita says, in the name of Rabbeinu, in the name of our rabbis, Baal Sulam, and the Rebbe Zitzal, every Jew has an inner Jew and inner non-Jews. Every non-Jew has an inner Jew and an inner non-Jew. Every single human being has all the aspects of reality within themselves. We are all expressing different aspects of reality. So, for example, those righteous Gentiles that we mentioned were actualizing that inner Jew more so than a Jew may today actualize themselves. Perhaps even a religious Jew today may be actualizing the inner nations of the world more so. But it's important to clarify, even though we observe and see that there's the Jewish nation, the nations of the world, that all people are representing principles within ourselves. That the Jew is representing the principle of the will to give, and the nations of the world are presenting the will to receive. But all of us have all of these aspects within ourselves. It just so happens by halacha By Jewish law, yes, if your mom is Jewish or you've converted, by law you're Jewish. But by the deepest sense of the word, as bitter as it may be, you're not necessarily Jewish yet. I myself want to be a Jew. Baruch Hashem, yes, my parents are Jewish. I'm halachically Jewish, but I'm trying to be Jewish in the truest sense of the word, because I acknowledge that I have so much more work to be done. I'm so far from my goal, but slowly but surely, I can come to that exalted state of giving to give, of true altruism, through the means of Torah and mitzvot. And to clarify in regards to Gaia Arts and Spirit's comment, that can only be done through the tools that allow me to control and have a rein on my will to receive for myself alone. I need the guidelines and tools in order to control my ego. It is a very great responsibility. That's very true. It's a very, very great responsibility. And with great power comes great responsibility. And anyone who's connected to these words and these ideas is already given some level of responsibility to, at the very least, contemplate it and ask themselves what it means practically for themselves and how they can apply it or share it with others. So if you enjoyed, please share with those who you think would enjoy the class. And check out the other sections in the series. And keep tuned. Keep tuned in for the future classes to come, also in English for other holy works. If you have any questions, please email me. The email is in the description. There also should be some links to some free books and literature also on the Kabbalah of Rabbi A쉬ragu and the like. But thank you so much for your comments. It's really pleasant to have some feedback. Usually I'm not sharing any of these ideas with active listeners and comments going on. So it's very nice to have some response and some feedback. I would like to be, thank you so much, but far from it. But the truth is, at the same time, the Chazal tell us that that is our inheritance, that all of Israel are tzaddikim. Meaning to say that Yisrael splits into two words, Yashar Kel, straight to God, L'Shem Shemayim, pure intention, meaning everything that I do, if I'm truly in Yisrael, if I'm truly manifesting and actualizing the essence of a Jew, then everything I'm doing is for the sake of heaven. And because we all have that innermost point of Yisrael within, we're all already tzaddikim. Why? Because everything that will come in the future, when we're looking at the parameter of above time and space, it's as if it's already here. It's actually a law that any idolatrous tree that has the din, that has the law, it's already been said that this tree will be burned and incinerated because of its use for idolatrous ways. It's as if it's already been burned. So to the Baal Sulam says in the introduction to the Zohar, because our true self and infinite, eternal self is our soul, it's as if we're just souls. It's as if the body isn't here because the body withers and goes away. Again, the principle is that which will come is as if it's already here. With that said, we are all tzaddikim. We are all amazing, beautiful souls that have such infinite potential to love and to give to each other and connect to one another. So if you'd like to continue any type of connection, please reach out, an email, or just subscribe and keep in tune to the classes. Until next time, all the best.